Should you watch Fruit of the Evolver? What? Okay, what? All right. So, maybe. Fruit of the Evolver is an incredible example of an anime that is a very, very slow burn, also does so many things, but it kind of hurts itself by the fact that it does so many of those things because it does never capitalize on those tropes or things. Instead, this show is first and foremost a comedy show. If you want to enjoy the show, go into it knowing that it's a comedy. Every single thing, every trope, every fun mechanic is entirely based around how do we get some comedy out of this. And the reason why I call it a slow burn is because I never really connected or resonated even with the comedy and in a lot of ways the characters or the story until episode 8. Could be Stockholm Syndrome, but also, I do think it gets better. On a service level, Fruit of the Evolver has everything that you want on paper if you're anything like me. It has a power fantasy, it's isekai, so they get teleported to, of course, a fantasy world. There is romance and a bunch of different characters, i.e. harem weirdness, but cool characters nevertheless. And of course, a magic system that is imbued in this world that seems very, very fun to decode and see how it can be leveraged and all of those things. Now, very quickly, the main character is very different. He is overweight and has horrible BO. And everyone in the class makes fun of him. But as they get isekai'd, he is the last one to get there and therefore gets a special talent, which of course, it's both frustrating power, but power nevertheless, which is essentially instanced learning. So as soon as he sees something, he basically can understand that book immediately, which is quite nice. And as you may have guessed, extraordinarily OP and literally has him later flipping through some pages of a magic book and just immediately becoming a master. This is literally a consistent trope throughout the entire show of like, oh, you like power fantasy? Oh, it's that time to give him power again. Ooh, he killed an enemy. Here's a boatload of books and gear that teaches him how to be a god. Okay, move on. Here's a joke. Let's get to the real meat of the potatoes of the show. Comedy. Comedy. Arguable also. First couple episodes, Demi never really had a punchline. We'll get into that later. The main character, because he kind of lagged behind when it comes to teleporting and getting isekai'd, he arrives in this horrible jungle filled with incredibly high-level mobs, and he gets around fighting those mobs by stealing some of their fruit. This, of course, is the Fruit of the Evolver. Essentially, this is a really cool thing and a thing that this show does really well, but it's a world-building show. It does quite a good job at it. So outside of level, there's like the quality of your genetic makeup for whatever race you are. So there's like tier 1 of human, and there's tier 10 of human, and tier 10 of human just looks like Giga Chad, handsome, cannot put on weight, also has an absolute affinity for strength and all these weird things. So you just basically become an absolute tank as far as your body and your attributes and your like kind of unfair advantage on the world is concerned. Very similar to Reincarnated as a Slime, exactly in the sense that as soon as you evolve into anything that is in level 1, you become Schmexy Human, which, you know, sure, okay, I'm actually fine with it, run it. And this brings us to, of course, one of the biggest tropes that made me want to watch the show because it is so weird, and this show, by the way, is the most weird. There is a pink gorilla waifu, which looks adorable, is very kind, but it's also like a Giga Bro Chad voice actor and very masculine, but it's a woman, and it falls in love with this, of course, main character who is thick as hell still at the beginning, but eventually he eats enough fruit and basically evolves into a handsome man. Fast forward even more, eventually she becomes evolved, and these two are basically husband and wife. Mind you, the whole I love you gorilla happened before human was a thing. So kind of, the show gets real close to bestiality, but that's not even near. The other things are also here. Sexually charged, weird, fetishy things are also along the horizon. Some of you may love this. Most of you will love this. Everything after this point is kind of a mixed bag of what you're going to be experiencing. Is essentially him meeting new people, them joining him, we'll say it in that nicest way possible, him going to a town, him meeting a bunch of people, and him going into a guild, and this is where the show is just brilliantly weird, but the guild is a bunch of freak shows. It's a bunch of weird, lovely, creepy, weird people. One dude wears a Speedo, and keeps all of his items in there, and they refer to his junk smelling horrible. It's just a whole thing. There's a girl who's a dom. There's a dude who's into baby play weird shit. There's a dude who's into flashing. It's just a whole ass mess and just a sexual degenerate nightmare, essentially. Also, there's like a gang who very much, yeah, they yeah, they're getting after it in a seemingly forceful way. Anyways, ladies and gentlemen, it's a weird show. But let me talk about, because I think I'm making it sound quite good. And it is. It's definitely weird, and it's definitely like that part I found charming. The part that I lost I think if you wanted to enjoy the show, let's do this. If you wanted to enjoy the show, do not do what I did. I seen this show as, oh my god, it's an experience with so many things that I love to engage with. The power fantasy, the shonen, the romance, different character types, being able to see how that interacts, aka harem shows, etc. Seeing a person that people left behind and judged poorly still remain good and still be good in this new world. I love all of these tropes. None of that is ever captured. Again, this show, if you want to enjoy this show, the sooner you can realize it's just a comedy show. It's not trying to be anything else. It's just funny. I'll say, I think the beginning, this is why for me, at the 8th episode is where it started to get good, is because at the 8th episode, they started to finally have punchlines. I was trying to narrow in why I didn't find a lot of the show funny, at least the beginning part. And I think it's a lot of it is humor that is like randomness for the sake of randomness, which I hear is Gen Z humor a little bit. But that could be a misperception, but there's very rarely a punchline, which I always appreciate for shows like Konosuba. And actually, I was even going to introduce this video by saying my initial thought when I was watching those first 8 episodes before I think it got good, I was going to say that this show to me feels like so many things that there's other things that do it better. So for instance, if you like comedy a lot, I think Konosuba, Combatants Will Be Dispatched, these are all shows that to me, they're my generations and my version of comedy that I really like. Same thing with The Disastrous Life of Psyche K is also a brilliant anime that's incredibly funny if you like dry humor and just goofy characters. So there are so many better options right now in terms of comedies, but it does get significantly better. And same thing, I was going to say, if you liked power fantasy, there's Overlord, there's Shield Hero, there's a bunch that we've talked about on the channel. So to me, I just felt like the show never measured up, but I don't think the show is trying to do that. I think the show, its main tenets that make it iconic, and actually I want to see a season 2. The last 4 episodes were that good, but also I kind of put through the grunt work of having to watch all of it. So if you're able to grunt through the whole bit of it, I think you'll come out the other side being like, actually that was pretty enjoyable. But those first 7 episodes, I feel like will lose maybe a lot of people. Maybe people just like to see the harem thing. Maybe some people just like to see some power. I just feel like a lot of the reasons why I didn't like it is because nothing was ever flushed out or felt like it was the best version of why people like that trope, you know? Like basically, again, he kills a boss, he walks up to it, there's some goofy comedy shtick stuff, and then he just sucks in all of the knowledge that this being of death had. And within the 7th episode, he basically is the strongest character in the entire, or not 7th, like 5th episode, he's basically the strongest person in the world. And to me, that just feels like, especially if, like the fact that it wasn't like a clever thought that he had, like, and this is a shout out to Trapped in a Dating Sim, which I liked a lot, is it was a lot of weird cleverness and like using his power and using what little he had to try to attain this one thing that would give him a lot of power, which felt actually earned because he was clever enough to think that far ahead. But in this show, none of that happens. It's just, again, it's like, what can we do to get us to our next big joke? And also, could we manage to squeeze a tag in here that says like shonen, power fantasy, harem, that would be okay, that would get us there. But again, enough rambling nonsense for me. I did want to specify, if you do want to enjoy the show, go into it knowing that its core tenets are being a weird show. Like it doesn't stray away from its weird strangeness. It's comedy, which I love, by the way. I love the weirdness. I sometimes feel like it's aimless. Like there's usually weirdness should have a point. Maybe it's a reaction to the external world, but because everyone's weird all the time and it's so different all the time, there's no one really reacting to the strangeness. Like if they had a normal-ish person, then that would add some contrast, but otherwise it's just like, no, everything's kind of insane in this world. Anywho, so the core tenets are its weirdness and of course its humor. And again, as you progress through the story, eventually things start to develop enough to where you start to getting to one of the best parts of this story, which I think is world building. I'm very interested to see what happens when he meets his friends. I'm very interested to see what happens when he eventually interacts with the Demon King. Is there going to be something there? Also, by the by, there is a greenlit season 2 on the way. Ideally, apparently, it's going to be coming out next year, early next year, 2023. Who knows if that's going to hold, because the years have just been madness. We all know that. But let me know what you guys think about it. I don't think it's a bad show. At the beginning, I do think it's a show that at the beginning, to me, did not get me invested, and I didn't really connect with the humor very much. But as it progressed, the more I kind of started to warm up to the characters, the more I started to kind of laugh because there's starting to be punchlines. It almost felt like a show that found its stride towards the end. And the ending did feel quite satisfying. Although I do find it frustrating sometimes when the character just had it all without having to earn anything. Like there's, as much like power fantasy, should be some sort of cleverness, I hope, to attaining the strength that others would revel at, you know? Ladies and gentlemen, hopefully you enjoy the rest of your day. Let me know what you guys think about the show. This is one of the first ones where I feel like I got lost in it and I somehow came out the other side enjoying it, but my initial experience was not great. So if you are watching it, maybe expect that too. It's a show that's made for people who are able to make it to the end. And if you are, let me know if you did also enjoy it as well, or maybe I just had some weird Stockholm Syndrome weirdness. Let me know.